And speaking of the game, it is Penn State-Purdue. Your most recent work, you did a great comparison of the two starting quarterbacks this week, both of them super seniors, so they're in their sixth year, and that's Aidan O'Connell from Purdue and Sean Clifford from Penn State. And you did that comparison using something you call Relative Performance Index, or RPI. First of all, could you explain to our listeners what RPI is?
Yep, of course. So it's quite simple, I think, actually. So if you take any stat, let's say for quarterback, yard per passing attempt, and then you look at how they've performed against what their opposing defenses have averaged giving up. So if an opposing defense averages giving up 6 yards per passing attempt, but a quarterback averaged 7.2 yards against that defense, then they would have an RPI of 120%. So 120%. It's always on a percentage basis. If the defense was giving up 6 yards and the quarterback in the game only got 5.4, then they would have an RPI of 90%.
Now, when you merge all this together, do you weigh the different statistics differently? Is each one weighted comparably? How does that work?
It's all open for interpretation, right? But at the end of it, we try to take, and especially when we have a head-to-head matchup, we try to take them all together and then predict what the quarterbacks will a range that the quarterbacks will fall into for the game. So, using Penn State and Purdue defenses, we look at their kind of last 3-year average and then see how the quarterback performed on a relative performance index basis, and then we can get a range of what we would expect for Sean Clifford and Nate O'Connell going into the game this year. So it's all got kind of equal weight, but so certainly some stats are more meaningful than others.
All right, let's look now specifically at what you found out about Sean Clifford and Aidan O'Connell, the two quarterbacks who we'll see this Thursday between Penn State and Purdue.
For completion percentage, interestingly, Sean Clifford has a 102 RPI away and a 101 home. So he is basically taking from a completion percentage on average exactly what the defenses want to give up. Aidan O'Connell, on the other hand, for completion percentage, has a very low away versus home split, 115% each way, but he's at 115% completion percentage, so considerably higher. In terms of yards per attempt, here's a case where Aidan O'Connell has a 112 in both home and away, so again, fairly consistent, independent of the location. Sean Clifford at home has 112% RPI in yards per attempts for again, home games. And then in away games, he drops down. So he's about 97% at away. So he might fare a little bit worse in the away games than you would expect him to at home, which is an interesting stat. So here, maybe we'll get to where Purdue was last year, but here's a case where maybe Sean Clifford is going to be a little bit down in RPI versus Aidan O'Connell. In passing touchdowns, O'Connell is 165% passing touchdowns generated versus what a defense would normally allow. So, again, here, this is a 2/3 increase. So if a team is giving up 2 passing touchdowns per game, he's going to be expected to get about 2.7 passing touchdowns per game. Clifford at home is 141%, and then away a little bit below at 94%. So Sean Clifford has a lot broader home away splits than Aidan O'Connell does, who's virtually the same whether he plays at home or away. And then finally, quarterback rating. Sean Clifford is going to get, give or take, exactly what the defense allows. So his away stat for quarterback rating is 100. So he is exactly on the expectation. At home, better, 114. Aidan O'Connell, again, 117 away, 116 at home. And he's got a very, very tight kind of distribution at home. So he's going to perform well this week. I like doing this comparison just because rather than straight up head-to-head stats where you don't really, take into consideration the quality of opponent, like you said before, this is a way that allows us to really see how a quarterback is going to do when it's opponent adjusted. And what it comes down to for an expectation is that Clifford should have a completion percentage between 60 and 67. O'Connell is going to be between 64 and 74. Yards per attempt, Clifford 6.2 to 8.2, O'Connell 6.7 to 8.4. Quarterback rating, actually, interestingly, is a place where the range for Clifford is very broad, so 112 to 153. compared to 132 to 146 for O'Connell. So, Clifford, if he really kind of does an amazing job this week, he could actually outperform O'Connell based on what he has done in his past.
Well, if you tell any Penn State fan or most Penn State fans that there could be a huge range of outcomes for Sean Clifford, I don't think that's going to come as much of a surprise. In going through this study of the two players, though, was there anything that surprised you from the statistics that came to light?
As much as anything, it's how good Aidan O'Connell has been and how consistently good he has been against the opponent expectation. And you'll see if you look at the article when it comes out, the red dots are 2021. His red dots are very, very high, so they've been good. But again, he's lost a lot of weapons coming into this year. Clifford's red dots, the 2021, maybe are a little bit low. But I also did an analysis in the past couple of weeks to see how he performed before and after the Iowa injury. Before his injury, we're averaging 5.9 yards per play. Afterwards, for the rest of the season, with Clifford playing most of it, we're averaging 5.1. So there was a big hit in yards per play, yards per pass attempt. And, certainly some of that was just purely the injury. So we'll see how that goes. But that is going to impact, his RPI from last year.